Hello, welcome everyone. We're happy to have all of you here. We're looking forward to a great webinar. For us, this is the first webinar with a selection of innovators, so we're also keen to see how we can make this really effective and what works and how we can make this into a powerful tool for partnership building on our side. So we're looking forward to great contributions from Alden, from Project Just, Made in Africa Wage Indicator Foundation, and we'll start with a short introduction by what Hill is doing in Innovating Justice and what Hill has been doing with the Living Wage Innovation Challenge and in the garment industry. Very briefly about what Hill has been working on. Hill works on justice and on combining innovation and entrepreneurship with justice and making sure that the entrepreneurial energy that is there can really bring more access to justice to many more people around the world. So our target is to bring access to justice to 40 million people around the world. We do this in a number of ways. So we've been doing this for 10 years, but since the last 5 years, we have an Innovating Justice Accelerator working on finding the interesting entrepreneurs, top game changers in the world of justice, and with a unique idea, connecting them to interesting partners and helping them to scale up. We do a number of challenges, and and one of the tools we use for that is also is our website. So we have a website where we run international challenges with our clients, and that is at innovatingjust.com, a website where we run challenges around particular justice needs in the world. The garment sector is a sector where with enormous amounts of employees, many female workers, a lot of oppression, a lot of difficult conditions for many people. There is a lot of injustice in the garment industry. So last year we were approached by CNA Foundation, and we started a partnership with CNA Foundation to look at the innovations in the garment industry that could really make a difference and bring more justice to workers in the garment industry and increase the wages for some workers in the garment industry. So we also looked at fair wages as a specific point of interest. We ran that challenge, and we looked at over 200 innovations in that sector, in the space, garment industry related, and around garment industry. We ended up selecting around 35 innovations that we also showcased on our community, in our networks, and on innovatingjustice.com. So if you go to innovatingjustice.com, you can see the challenges, and one of the challenges is the Living Wage Innovation Challenge that we ran last year. There you will see a set of all innovations that we looked for last year. So today we are choosing and showing the three top finalists of that year. We are really proud to have found them. We're really proud to see the progress they're making, and we're really happy to showcase today what they're doing, and they will explain what they're working on, the impact they're striving for, and also the type of partnerships they're looking for that can really be helpful for them. So we hope that this is a great occasion for you to see if there is a partnership possible with any of the innovators and whether you can work together to build the market, to build the impact that you have. So that is what we've been doing, and I invite all of you to have a look at innovatingjustice.com, because besides the three that we showed today, there is 32 other innovators that could be great partners for what you are doing. Today we mainly focused on ethical fashion brands, to invite you to look at some of these innovations, because if you do build very interesting partnerships with them, you're in a great position to help them out, to grow their impact, to grow their potential, and they are in a great position to give you more access to markets, better visibility, and a more interesting profile towards your consumers. So I will now give the floor to Alden Wicker to give a bit of background on sustainability. How do you market yourself as an ethical brand, ethical fashion, whether you are an innovator or a fashion brand, and then we move towards the different innovators. Alden, can you share some of your perspective on this topic?
Sure, thank you. So I'm the founder of EcoCold, which is a New York-based blog that covers all things sustainable and ethical. That includes fashion, beauty, food, home design, and events. And my goal is to convince consumers that are on the fence about the ethical life that it actually is the better way to live, and it can be fun, and it can be beautiful, and it can be just a really wonderful way to live your life. So I do that by showcasing the best in sustainable and ethical design. So in the past about 5 or 6 years, we've seen a real explosion in the options for consumers in ethical and sustainable design. And consumers are expecting and getting fashion, beauty, and design that fits their lifestyle, whether they live in the countryside on a homestead or they're going to work at a corporation and going out at night in the city. There's something for everyone at this point. So we've moved from the first phase of sustainability, which is convincing consumers that it's their moral duty to give up things that they love in order to live ethically and sustainably, and sort of against consumerism and against capitalism. And we've moved to a second phase of sustainability, which is giving consumers what they want, but in a more sustainable version. And in that, supporting artisans who are working in developing countries, or keeping jobs at home in the United States or in Europe, or doing things in a way that doesn't harm the environment. So we're giving consumers the option to really engage with their friends on their level and wear the things that they want to wear, but just do it in a way that aligns with their values. So ethical and sustainable design has become really beautiful and luxurious and also affordable and edgy and desirable. Some things that I could tell brands about how to market themselves. As far as social media goes, there's some really good examples of fashion brands that are doing it well, like Reformation and Shinola. Reformation, in their profile on Instagram, for example, all they say is, "We make killer clothes that don't kill the environment." It's a really succinct statement that sums up the fact that they make sexy, beautiful clothes, and also that they're doing it in an environmentally conscious way. You'll notice that they don't dump into their profile all the ways in which they're ethical and sustainable. The reason why they do that is that they're keeping it really fun and light on the front facing, and they're allowing consumers who are interested in the details of how they do that to go to their website and find out what they're doing there. So, you know, they're using alpaca instead of cashmere. They're using offset fabrics, using eco-friendly fabrics, but they don't stick that right on the front because they're keeping it not heavy at the front end. They're keeping it sexy. They're keeping it really attractive, and letting consumers who care more go behind and find more. And then consumers who just want to find some fun clothes, well, that's fine too. They can still find some fun clothes, and they don't need to necessarily engage in a lot of education on the front end. Shinola says in their profile they are a Detroit-based company dedicated to quality, craft, and creating world-class manufacturing jobs in the U.S. So again, they have a pretty succinct statement that says what they're all about. If you go to their website, you can find more about how they're trying to bring manufacturing back to Detroit, that they pay a living wage, that they're training people and giving them a career. So that's a really good way to address it across all your social media. And then you should really spend a lot of your time and energy putting up beautiful images and really interesting content that's on brand for you. It should show, some of these things should show your product because you're trying to sell that product, and a few should show your process or talk sort of pithily and succinctly about your ethical and sustainable qualities. So what I look for in a product, I get a lot of pitches from a lot of brands who are doing really great work, and unfortunately I cannot cover all of them. I just don't have the room, and also I wouldn't want to cover all of them because I have a specific viewpoint, but I can tell you a little bit about what kind of emails get through to me as an editor and other editors and make me want to share your story with the world. So what I look for, first, the very first thing is I look at the pictures. So every email I get has a story about why it's ethical, why it's sustainable. So at that point, I'm not looking at that first. What I'm really looking at is, do I want this product to be on my website? Do I want to be associated with it? Because I am a brand as well, and so I want my brand to be associated with beautiful things. And it's also just the fact that if you have beautiful pictures, I want to share those with my readers, and it makes it easier for me to do so. So I would recommend any fashion brand to really spend on a good photographer, on models, on high-quality photo shoots, because I've seen products come through that they look like they could be good, but because they don't have high-quality photos, I'm not really totally sure. Plus, a lot of bloggers and editors don't have the budget or time to take their own photographs, so they're relying on you to provide them with these photos, high-res photos that they can put up on their site really easily. So it's incredibly important. Do not skimp on that. The second thing I look at is your product offering something different or surprising? Are you bringing something new and useful to the market? I really like brands that solve a problem for me, that offer me a product that I've been looking for in the sustainable or ethical version and I have not found yet. So I've never thought to myself, oh man, I really wish someone would make beaded bracelets, because we all know that there are lots of places to get beaded bracelets. I've never thought to myself, I really need an ethical scarf. There's lots of ethical scarves on the market. I know that I could find 15 different options within 10 minutes. So an example of a company that's solving a problem that I think is really interesting is Citizens Mark, which they're making really, really nice jackets for women that are for business settings. And that's a problem that needs solving. Up until this point, you couldn't find a good business jacket that was made ethically and consciously. So that's something that I get really excited about, and I'm going to be putting it on my website. So, so your product should be positioned in a way that it's doing something that makes editors perk up and say, oh, that's different, that's new, that's interesting. And so that might mean taking the skills of the people that's making your product and thinking about how it can be translated into a consumer-facing product that's different and new and interesting. And also I would say, let's see, also you should have a very beautiful website design, because I'm also clicking through right away and looking at that. And then the final thing is obviously I'm looking for something that's ethical and sustainable, so you should have that in your email and in your marketing, but it should be pretty short. It should be easy to digest, one paragraph. Again, if people are interested, they're going to go and they're going to look for more, but just keeping it simple on the front end will pull people into your product and ensure that you get coverage and you get followers and you get sales. So those are my tips, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Alden. Great, very interesting. Are there any questions from the people who have signed up in the meantime, or from the innovators themselves about marketing in the ethical fashion industry and what you can do there? Any questions from the group? I am seeing some people on mute, but I'm also not hearing any questions yet. I think that means, Alden, that you were very clear. If questions come up, I am going to give a general invitation to the audience, because there's more than 20 people signed up at least now. So do feel free to write in your questions. We will pick them up and we can pass them on to Alden or one of the innovators that we have on today. Okay, and Alden, if you have specific questions for the innovators, please feel free to join them as they go over their presentation. So thank you very much. And I suggest we go over to Project Just now with Natalie and Shad. Who starts on that end?
I'll go ahead and get started if you guys can hear me clearly. This is Shahad.
Hi. Shahad?
That was a really great introduction from Alden, because I think, can you hear me?
The sound is not, the quality is not good. So try once more. If it doesn't, if the quality does not improve, I think it may be better if Natalie takes over. But try once more.
How about now? Is it better?
Yes.
I think that was Alden. I think it leads very well into what we're about to talk about. I'm excited to introduce you all to Justin here. So I'm going to start by sharing a screen.
Shad, I believe that the sound quality is really is not good enough. We're struggling to hear you.
Okay, no worries. I'll take over. Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
This is Natalie. Thanks very much, Alden. And I have to say, it was such a pleasant surprise. Alden and I actually we're both in the same city. We happened to run into each other on Thursday at another event. So it was great to meet in person, and we really admire what you're doing. One question that I did have, and maybe you can jump on and answer it later, but I'm curious to know, with the diverse amount of different things that you can really care about as an ethical shopper, what you have found are really key issues for people, and how to really use that to move people forward in terms of educating them even more about additional issues. Some people care about organic, some people care about child labor, and it's difficult for a brand to necessarily check all the boxes and be completely sustainable. And I think some of them hesitate then consequently to talk about what they're doing as a result. So it'd be cool to hear what, from your perspective as, as an insight into the shopper, what you would say about that. But with that, let me jump in and talk a little bit about Justin. I think that this was a really good lead-in actually to what we do. And so at Just, what we do is we empower the shopper and tell the stories behind your clothes. Let me share my screen first. Okay, and Wilfred, can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can.
Great. So at Just, we tell the stories behind your clothes. We focus on the consumer and empowering the shopper. We do that by using data, design, and transparent stories to engage and empower the shopper. We firmly believe, I think as many people on the call do, that clothing should not only express our identity but our values as well, and that beauty is defined not just by the way a piece of clothing, how a piece of clothing looks, but by the story of how it came to be. And so we use multiple platforms to help tell that story. The first way that we do that is through a mobile app. A second way that we do that is through an e-commerce plugin that the brand can use on their website. And the third way is through stories and content that we make available to the brand as well. And I'll go more into how that actually works and how we work with a brand. But first, I'd like to just explain a little bit about the context of where we're coming from and why we do what we do a little bit more in depth. So we really focus on reaching the online shopper and the shopper in the retail environment as well. And specifically, we're focused on the millennial consumer. This consumer between the ages of 20 up to 35, you can go a little bit higher, a little bit lower, depending on the different definition. But as many of us are aware, and some of us are millennials ourselves, we want to learn more about the products that we purchase and engage with those products that have positive impact on the world. We very much align with the values of the brands, and we want the brands to show in honest, authentic, and truthful ways what they do for their sourcing and how they make their product.
I believe Alden was just mentioning it, but we really think Reformation is a great example of this, and Warby Parker is another one, who they really show in depth where and how they make their product, and they align their brand values with how they make the product and what they do to help make positive community impact where they work. They also are looking to interact with this information in a certain way. So they're looking for this authentic and transparent information through their phones. They want the information to feel like it's real and new and fresh, and they like it to be quick. So Snapchat and Facebook obviously offer information in that way. So the challenge, though, for a lot of the brands out there that particularly around sustainability and ethics and around having this authentic, transparent sourcing information is that it's very dry information. So it may be a bunch of stats about a particular factory, it may be a percentage, and a lot of it is also gathered through annual audits, which are expensive and time-consuming. And as some brands have found, even including Patagonia, that information can sometimes be false or inaccurate. So we really believe that some brands out there, like Reformation, like Shinola, they've made this content really engaging. And for us, we wonder at Just, well, what if all of the brands out there who are doing this incredible, impactful work could make that content engaging? And if there was a different way also to collect that content in the first place, one that is affordable, efficient, and is able to be gathered in real time so that you have that fresh content. And so that's what we do at Just. So we make it easy for you as a brand to communicate fresh and authenticated content with your consumers and to build honesty and transparency behind your brand. So the way that we do that is we allow we allow the brands to quickly and easily gather the information from the supplier and to communicate it up to the consumer directly through the mobile app and through the e-commerce plugin that I was mentioning before. And this, in turn, by seeing as a consumer and a shopper where your clothing has come from, it allows them to feel more directly connected to both the people who made it and the stories behind the products. So here's one example of how we do that, as I was mentioning the mobile app. Right now we have the functionality where a consumer can quickly and easily access rich data from the supply chain, as well as media content, photos, videos, a crafted story, a crafted experience, by scanning a tag on an item of clothing. This scan is not done through a QR code, and it's not done through a barcode. It's done with our app, which allows you to just hold the phone over the tag, and the app instantly picks up the graphic, and it takes you to the videos, graphics, and photos about the product and brand immediately on the mobile phone. The first page is not meant to be overwhelming to the shopper. It's meant to be a interactive, immersive experience so that you can see a video from the factory floor, you can see some photos and maybe one or two metrics without it being overwhelming for them and having too much kind of thrown at them at once. As I said, we also allow this same story to be told through the e-commerce platform, so consumers can easily access this content through existing channels where they already are interacting with the brand online. And this allows them to really feel that the story that the item that they're purchasing has that authentication right there and then. So let me talk a little bit about how we gather these stories and how we gather this content and data from the supply chain. So brands have two options. They can collect and submit their own data from suppliers. So if you already have content from your supply chain, you can give that to us and we'll go through a process of authenticating it. Alternatively, we have an app that you can use with your supplier, which aggregates this fresh content on a regular basis without being overwhelming for the supplier or producer. And this automatically will update and flow into the brand's consumer-facing page, depending on the particular content that you've chosen to select on your consumer page. One example of a brand that we're working with is called Loomstate. They work with a cotton supply chain in India to make organic t-shirts that are sold here in the US. These t-shirts are used for uniforms at a variety of large companies here in the US, but are also made available for direct sale to shoppers. What we've done with them is made their logo and some of their partners who they make the uniforms for, made their logos scannable, and the logo will take, scanning the logo will take the shopper or the owner of the uniform to a page showing the entire story behind how the t-shirt was made, from farm all the way up to cut and sew. We see increasingly that companies like Loomstate and their partners like Chipotle are really interested in authenticating what they have stood for from the very beginning, and they want to go beyond just showing what they do on a page on their website saying this is our mission. They want to act on it and directly engage the consumer with the story. So really quick, the way that it would work if you were to come on board with Just is the first step is to register your suppliers. So you sign up and log in your supplier information. Then you choose the metrics that you would like the supplier to report on a regular basis, and that you can then show to your consumers. And then the supplier is notified to log in and can start providing the data and content for the metrics that you have selected. Then what we do is we visualize that data. So we believe that context is king, and that most metrics need to be displayed with contextual data points. So for instance, showing a living wage, we actually are in talks with another presenter later on, the Living Wage Indicator and the Living Wage Foundation, to make sure that every time that we show a wage in one of the supply chains, that it is contextualized against a living wage for that region. And we believe that that really allows the consumer or the shopper to understand what's going on in the supply chain beyond just a number. And then we also really believe that multimedia rich content and displaying how things work is very important. Visualization of how the supply chain works, how the clothing is made, and who the people are that make it is also very important. So with that, I didn't time myself, but I hope I haven't gone over, and I will open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Natalie. Are there any questions from the innovators or from the audience? A question that I have and that maybe we can start with is, can you tell us a little bit more on where you're currently at, and what kind of partnerships you're looking for to take the next steps, and what are the next steps that you're planning to take? Can you give a little bit more insight on that?
Sure. So we have a major partnership with Loomstate and some of the partners with whom they work, making that supply chain story available to their shoppers, and then also to the partners and the partner consumers that work with Loomstate. We're also in the process of creating several other pages for additional brands, bringing them on board onto our app, so that both in-store and online, the consumer can interact with the story and get that authenticated and transparent information. Right now, we're looking for additional brand partners to come on board. As we are a startup, we think our prices are pretty reasonable. And depending on how many supply chains you're interested in authenticating, how many garments you're interested in showing the story behind, we're happy to talk about what that could look like. The supplier application is currently in testing as of right now, and will be officially launched this month. So we're also looking for partners who have suppliers who are willing to test and come on board with us so that we can aggregate suppliers and supplier stories to tell to the world about all the positive impact that some of these suppliers out in all over the world are having using ethical and sustainable practices. Made in Africa, who's also presenting today, will be helping us to test that out. So if there are suppliers on the line, or if brands have suppliers that they believe would be interested in this, we're also looking for that. And then our consumer app right now, our consumer app, our shopper app is ready to go. But we'll be launching a V2 of that in the fall, which will allow even a greater expansion of brands and logos to be scanned with the story behind those brands. I can't hear Wilfred. I'm not sure if maybe anyone else can. Oh, okay, I can hear.
Yeah. Is there anyone from the innovators or Alden maybe who has a question for Natalie or a suggestion?
I mean, it sounds really great because I think a lot of brands have trouble figuring out how to communicate all of this. I'll turn on my camera. So, I mean, I guess my question would be, like, how customizable is all this information aesthetically to, because I mean, a brand will have a certain aesthetic, so is that customizable as well?
Yeah, great question. So we have a basic template that we work off of with particular pieces of information that we believe the shopper really prefers and likes to engage with. That includes certain metrics and certain types of media like video and photos. But it actually ends up being quite customizable in that we're able to use the brand's colors, their logos, and then to a certain degree, depending on what the partnership and collaboration looks like, we're able to make it pretty along the lines of the brand guidelines. However, I'll also add that we kind of believe that by having a partnership with Just, this lends additional authenticity because we are a partner rather than the brand just reporting this information themselves. And so to a certain extent, we do try to have our own logo and branding accompanying that of the brands, such that the consumer, the shopper, really understands that this is a platform where they can access additional information beyond just the brand's sustainability page.
Thank you. Anyone else from the group with a question? Maybe I think what I find interesting is, do you feel you can make the case that you can help ethical fashion brands to grow their market or to have more value for customers? Is there is that a case you feel you can make towards ethical fashion brands?
Yeah, so I think right now there's a lot of information out there in the industry saying one way or another that a consumer's willingness to pay increases, or at least they're willing to pay, or at least pay the same price for a product that has ethical and sustainable characteristics. But then there are also some studies out there that say that that isn't true. And so we believe the ones that say that there is, that there is an increased willingness to pay. I think a lot of people on the call probably believe that as well. That this is definitely a trend that isn't going away, particularly among millennials, but also among the generation after that, Generation Z, which is in college now and which is in high school and below. So I guess what I would say is I think that this is not something that we can ignore, that you can just kind of think, well, I don't need to really explain what happens in my supply chain. I think right now it's still a differentiator, as Alden was explaining, the more information, the more honesty and transparency you have behind what you do, the more that she feels confident in that purchase. And so I think that right now it's a differentiator, but I think that there's actually a little bit of urgency with it as well, in that I think that this is something that a lot of brands are going to come on board with, because the consumer and the shopper is increasingly going to ask for it. Does that answer your question, Wilfred?
It does to me. Thank you very much.
And Wilfred, I'll just say, if anybody had any additional follow-up questions, if they don't feel like writing it, they can feel free to reach out. Our information, we're at projectjust.com, and my email is Natalie, Natalie, at projectjust.com.
Yep. After this call, we'll also send the contact details of all the innovators around to everyone who signed up. So just they will have the contacts and the email address. But it's great that you remind us.
Great, thanks.
Okay, if I don't hear another question right now, then I suggest we go over to Made in Africa and to hear more about that.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, my name's Karen, and I am the president of Made in Africa, and I also have with me today Paloma, who is the SVP for Operations and Strategy, which sound very grand titles for a startup, but you know, you've got to start as you mean to go on, is the kind of aim there. I'm going to just share my screen with you, hopefully, if I can make this work. Oh, that didn't work. Hold on. First of all, that looks like a picture of... Okay, can you all see that in terms of a presentation?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. So I wanted to just start by telling you a bit of my background. I have worked for George Clothing, which is a subsidiary of Walmart, for 17 years, and as part of that I lived in Bangladesh for 3 years and ran the sourcing office there, and really tried to understand some of the challenges and the issues in Bangladesh. And then I also moved and lived in South Africa, having previously lived in Tanzania and spent a lot of time in Zimbabwe. So my background is more on the retail side of things, and understanding kind of what a retailer is looking for from a supplier. And what I've really understood over my time and my experience is that what we are finding in the industry at the moment shouldn't still be happening. We all feel passionately about that. Having been in Bangladesh and lived through the fires and the Rana Plaza, and the struggles that firstly retailers got of trying to trace some of these things, but also the challenge of dealing with mindset change and management change and things within the factory, means that it is a continuing problem into this century, and it really shouldn't be. We should have kind of moved on. Really, Africa, we feel, is kind of the next sourcing solution. It's a continent that is huge and offers a huge amount of skills and knowledge and passion, and amazing singing and music and lots of other things as well. But we really feel that it's primed and ready to be kind of the new frontier of sourcing. But one of the reasons that it can be like that is because it doesn't have a very well established industry at the moment. So there is a huge opportunity to go in and work alongside these factories from day one to help them to build factories that are what we are calling future factories. So that they're not just environmentally sustainable. They don't just give workers great engagement, those kind of things, but they are what we would consider to be, you know, the best employers in the region. So if you think about, you know, the Times in the UK and the ones here in terms of the US of the best employers of the world, what makes them the best employers? It's about workers having voices. It's about share saving schemes. It's about equity in companies. It's about all of those kind of things. So we want to work alongside factories to build factories where the workers feel empowered but still work within a factory environment. And the way that I feel really passionate about doing that is about lean productivity and efficiency, and getting a factory to being in that state kind of from the beginning. So Made in Africa in itself has come out of a business called Liberty and Justice. Liberty and Justice was built the first fair trade factory in Africa, as in the first one that was certified anyway. It was built in Liberia, and some of the qualities of that factory mean that the workforce is paying living wages. They have 49% equity in the factory, they have free healthcare, they have savings matching schemes, they have literacy classes. And they've still managed to provide product for feed, for Hagar, for Itochu at costs that are comparable. And one of the most exciting things about this is that Africa has the AGOA agreement, which you will all know, and is able to therefore have a duty benefit over exporting from Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, other places like that. So we have this huge opportunity with factories that are ready, workers that really require employment, and a way of doing business that is going to be different from the ways things have been. And I feel personally really passionate about that, especially having worked on the retailer side and understanding, for me, what makes a great supplier. And what makes a great supplier is about transparency, and it's about trust. So some of the things that we will be ensuring that we do is make sure that we show open costings to show where the cost of the raw materials is, where the cost of the wages is, so you can see what profit the factory is making, what they're putting back into the business, etc. And just to work alongside our brands in terms of being really transparent and come together to find solutions to things and work on things. We have gone a long way down the line with some smaller brands. I'm in New York this week to have meetings with some bigger brands as well. And we're really looking for people that want to go on a journey with us, to take a factory that may have 400 machines in it but only 30 employees at the moment. And how do you make that factory vibrant and has product going through it, and those workers are getting living wages and making real massive impact? Can you imagine 400 families impacted by one factory alone? Would be absolutely incredible. We're focused on Ghana and Benin at the moment, and then working in towards East Africa as well. And I'm going to pass over to Paloma, and she's going to give you a little bit more detail on the specifics around what makes a future factory and how we are also tying some other parts like trade financing into what we're doing.
Great. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here as well. All right. So I wanted to start off by giving everyone a little bit of background around what do we actually mean when we say future factory. So there are a lot of standards out there, a lot of assessments out there, and we've taken a lot of time and input from different stakeholders in the industry to narrow in on what do we think that it really matters. We've taken some inspiration from the Liberty and Justice factory in Liberia that Karen spoke about, where they're paying living wages, giving savings matching, actually also giving 49% equity in the factory to the workforce itself. But we also broadened this framework a little bit because we know that a future factory will look a little bit different in every context. So what you see here on the page are all of the elements of future factories that we care about. So there's living wages, worker engagement, democratic worker structures, benefits and impact. Under that, really what we're talking about is empowerment programs like savings matching programs or literacy classes, health and safety, including free healthcare, environmental impact. There we're really talking about reduction of waste, as well as use of renewable energy where possible. And then as Karen also mentioned, I really wanted to emphasize that how we're looking at developing all of these things in terms of future factory status is not through charging our brand customers more money. It's rather through achieving efficiency and productivity levels in the factory that enable reinvestment in all of these standards. So it becomes this virtuous cycle of investing in the workforce, empowering the workforce, and then seeing improved productivity and efficiency come out of that, that then allows us again to invest further in the workforce and in improving working conditions. So we believe very strongly that good working conditions are good business, particularly when you start talking about things like absenteeism, turnover, and of course productivity. So as we work with our factory partners on this journey, we also provide some concrete incentives for progress on this future factory standard. So as Karen was mentioning, one of the parts of our model, and actually one of the parts we find most innovative, is our trade financing scheme. So most of the factories we work with can't actually access affordable capital within their local market. They have trouble accessing capital at rates under 25% annual interest, even if they have a confirmed production order. So imagine trying to do business under those constraints. It's really amazing. I've actually been spending quite a bit of time in Ghana and Benin over the past 6 months. And I was in a factory the other day, and a bank official came in the door and proposed a loan at 57% interest. So it's mind-boggling, really. So it's a huge market failure, and one that we realized as Made in Africa that we needed to address if we were going to have any success at really moving these factories forward. So what we do is we allow our factories to access low rate, more affordable capital, but we make the rate of that capital dependent on how quickly they progress towards future factory status. So say they implement a savings matching program, their capital rate might go down from 10% to 8% or whatever it may be. So that's a really important part of our model that we feel makes it viable in terms of making sure that these factories are really going to progress on all of these standards. The other thing I wanted to emphasize here is that our approach is much more focused on continuous improvement than it is on assessment. So yes, we are doing regular assessments of our factories, but we're also in the factories every day. We have a team of on-the-ground experts in production and quality and ethics that we're building and developing right now. And those people are in the factories on a daily basis, working hand in hand with the factory managers, making sure that things are really progressing and moving forward. So it's a partnership approach, it's a sustainable long-term approach, and it's one where we're really focused on improving every day. So I just wanted to close here with talking a little bit about what is our value proposition to you as a brand. So I know there's a lot of brands on this call, and we've talked quite a bit about what we're doing on the factory side, but what is it that we're really offering you as a brand? And Karen spoke to this a little bit, but that there's really three things. One is, I'm going to take off my screen share here so I can just talk to you more directly. Let's see. Is that good? Great. So the first thing and the most fundamental thing is high quality product at competitive prices. So it's a high quality product. You're going to get excellent customer service because the Made in Africa team, as I mentioned, is on the ground every day with the factories and also has a presence within the US and Europe. And then lastly, you'll be assured that there's actually timeliness as well, and that's something that African production in the past, there's been some historical baggage around low quality, lack of timeliness, and we really want to transform that narrative by having such a hands-on, on-the-ground approach. The second thing is being sure that we are providing not just the products that you need, where your expectations are met and exceeded, but ensuring that there's an ethical standard behind that, and not just ethical in terms of baseline compliance, but going beyond that. And really ensuring that these factories are empowering workers and developing flourishing communities. So on that front, that's really kind of our competitive value proposition for brands like I think we have on the call, where you care a lot about making sure that your products are ethically made. And yeah, that's I think a really good value alignment and what we're looking for in terms of brand partners that are looking to go on this journey with us and creating future factories. So yeah, we'd be happy to follow up with you after the call around specifics, and we'll open it up to questions.
Thanks a lot, Paloma. I'm just going to try to make sure that we all know how to ask questions, because there are no questions coming in, so there's a bit of concern on our side that some people may struggle with that. On the top right of your screen, there is a cubic with 9 squares. If you click on that and then click on the Q&A icon, then you can ask questions and participate in the discussion. And feel free to also send us an email, tweet to us, or use any other means, but participate in the Q&A would be great. Does anyone in the group have a question or a suggestion, and someone from the audience? I am not seeing that. I think maybe Paloma, from my perspective, I think it could still be helpful if you clarify how you collaborate with the factories in Ghana, for example, and how you've selected the factories, because a lot of the ethical fashion brands are looking for reliable sourcing partners, and so can you be maybe a little bit more concrete on what you have been doing to select the right factories, etc., and how you collaborate with them?
Sure, definitely. So I've been in Ghana and Benin, as I mentioned, off and on over the past 6 months, and we took a very hands-on approach to figuring out which factory partners we wanted to go on this journey with. One of the main things that we assess beyond the baseline in terms of operational capacity and potential in terms of space, quality, etc., is looking at what is the management attitude. So really trying to assess, can we form a partnership with this factory owner and with these factory managers that is long-term, where they are also invested in making sure that the standards around wages, empowerment, benefits are realized. And we were really encouraged. I visited around 15 factories across Ghana and Benin, working in partnership with the West Africa Trade Hub to identify those factories. And we were really, really encouraged by what we found in terms of factory owners that are in this for the right reasons, that want to do this in order to develop their communities, to provide employment, and to make sure that that employment is not just kind of baseline compliant, but is actually empowering the workforce. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Karen.
Yeah, I guess I would just add that having worked on the other side and worked a lot with factories, you know, a lot of people talk about if you pay more money will go to the workers. And actually the people that are in control of that happening quite often are the factory owners. So you can pay more money for something. We were making jeans that were retailing at £5 next to diesel jeans that were retailing at £120. The worker did not earn anything different from our jean to the diesel jean at £120. So it's all down to the management, and not just the top management, but the middle management, of how much they want to be brought into the process and want to work alongside things like productivity bonuses and providing things like share saving schemes and those kind of things in order to get money to the workers. Otherwise, you can pay, 3 times as much for a t-shirt, but it doesn't mean the worker at the end of the day actually will benefit. So assessing the management attitudes and the middle management attitudes and looking at kind of their track records of some of the things they've done already has been a really important part, alongside, like Paloma says, all the obvious things of quality, machinery, capability, room for expansion, etc., etc.
Okay. Is there a certain customer that you would say is particularly interested in sourcing from Africa, or the identity of made in Africa, or for some of the ethical brands, is that do you work with brands with certain designs or with certain clothing items, or is that totally not relevant? It is
No, it's definitely relevant. So product's always the most important thing at the end of the day, in terms of if you can't get the product right, then the rest of it is always going to be difficult to achieve. So we've kind of got 2 parts to the business. We're working with ethical brands that really want some traceability around where their product is coming from, and guarantees in terms of developing factories. That's included some US brands and some local African brands from Nigeria and places as well that really want to look at those kind of things. And for those ones where they're smaller brands that want smaller runs of anything from kind of 20 to 500 to 1,000 units, we pick the factory then carefully to match being able to do that. Look at their ability to deliver fashion and at their ability to deliver a product. So everything from pattern grading to execution. But then we're also looking at larger brands where we can give maybe a 50,000 order of a chino or something, where you can get a factory running, and you can get a factory running really efficiently and consistently. And that way the impact and the number of people in a factory that you can impact is way bigger. So we want to be able to not exclude factories from that. The factory selection is far more around the attitude and the ability to grow and work with us than it is necessarily about can they make this or that. So machinery types and those kind of things are very important when it comes to products. You know, you can't always use a wovens factory for knits, etc. You've got to have the right things, and the execution of the product's very important.
Yep. And I will just re-emphasize that the bit around being able to work in small production quantities is actually quite unique. Brands struggle a lot to find factories that are willing to produce in the hundreds range rather than in the thousands range. And that's something that we're really committed to being able to provide, particularly for brands that are values aligned with what we're trying to do.
Okay, great. I'm going to give Carrie Lake the prize for the first question from the audience. Thank you, Carrie. Her question is, what is your approach to inviting personal relationships? There are so many differences in cultures. How do you open relationships with factory owners beyond the conversation of dollars?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll jump in on that. I've been, as I said, in factories quite a bit for the past 6 months, and one of the things that has been really rewarding is just being able to talk about my own personal journey of wanting to do this because of the reasons around providing empowerment and providing employment, particularly to women. And that has allowed for a lot of connection that's become more personal over time. One of the factory owners that we're working with, her name is Linda, and she is very committed to the impact piece of what she's trying to create with her factory. And so starting from a personal perspective and personal journey story, we've now become pretty close, and I've talked over personal things. I've met her family. It's become a relationship that's not just as you said about the business. So yeah, it's been a really rewarding part of working on this.
I think we've also, having lived in Bangladesh and lived in Africa, like understanding the culture and being able to work within that culture is really important. So, for example, if you are working in Bangladesh, then you meet, you talk, and you eat last, and after you've finished eating, and you all go home. Understanding that, things like that, and being able to speak the language and learning the language in the country, and understanding kind of where that factory and where that owner wants to take something is really important. But at the same time, we have defined some really clear business principles around transparency and around building trust that enable us to maintain a business relationship, because it's also really important as well that it doesn't become, we don't want to get into kind of being too personally friends with people, in the sense of, we are still maintaining a business, and if quality is not up to scratch or those things aren't happening, we need to be able to have those conversations too. So, Kerry, it's a really tough balance, and I appreciate the questions, but I think Paloma's right. It's about being on the ground, and I truly believe that you can't really deliver ethical factories and understand what's really going on unless you've got a team in the country where you're manufacturing.
Thank you, Karen. There are no other questions coming up. I believe we are ready to move to Wage Indicator Foundation with Jean-Paul. If there is anyone else who has a final question or suggestion for Made in Africa, please shoot. Otherwise, we will make sure you get their contacts also, and you can contact them directly after the call.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Jean-Paul, we are ready for a wage indicator.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. We're basically dealing with a very simple question, which is what is a fair wage? This is about the dry data, and I hope that we can provide a benchmark next to all the great stories that we see, which inspire many consumers. First, I'd like to make a little bit of a promotion for a film I watched a couple of weeks ago, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but for the ones who are not, I'd like to make a promo, The True Cost documentary, which did a very compelling job in exposing how all the costs around the garment production, how bad it's really chilling to the bone. And I thought I already knew a lot about this industry. Well, one scene which really stuck with me was where on a conference, Lydia Firth, person who's well known for eco entrepreneurship, challenged the corporate social responsibility director of H&M, on saying how much she was paying in Bangladesh. She was banging on about the question, how much, how much, how much? And she didn't get an answer. Maybe not completely fair, putting somebody on the spot in front of a whole audience, but I think it is a fair question to be asking. Because for all the nice audits, social corporate responsibility reporting, there is a question, how much is actually fair? We hope that we can bring a contribution in getting that more clear. Even my sister, a couple of weeks ago, was planning to do some shopping, and we got into a discussion, and she said, well, obviously I'm not going to buy at H&M, and I'm not going to buy at Primark, and the reason was that she suspects that people get paid very little. But she wasn't really sure that if she pays more, and I just heard in the previous presentation that people cannot be sure that if you pay more that you actually get a better living wage. Now, there are many progressive brands that are doing a good job in making sure the supply chain shapes up, but in the end there's need of benchmarks. Consumers don't know at the moment. It would be great if we have a simple rating. Brands may know the wages in the supply chain, but they have very little to compare with. Audits are done. I've talked to a lot of brands who are doing audits, but usually they are quite expensive. I think that also came around in the previous presentation. So it's very difficult to cover a very wide supply chain. Often that means that only a couple of parts are covered. It also means that there's only a repetition every 5 years in many methodologies, and it's open to distortion when you go and ask people what the living costs are locally. A couple of weeks ago I was in Indonesia, and there they've got both the employers and the employee organizations doing surveys, and the employers made sure that when they were estimating the cost of meat, they went in the afternoon to the market, and the employees, the trade unions, they went in the morning. So there are all kinds of ways that people try to manipulate the data or the benchmarks. I also talked to a progressive brand which really is making an effort to work with trade unions to get to local living costs. And he told me, the corporate social responsibility officer that was, that although they were sure they were doing a great effort, in the end he was also sure that in Turkey he got a way too negative result, and in Tunisia a way too positive result. So when you talk about living wage, we all have to be mindful that on the one hand you cannot impose a basket as you would use it in a country in Africa to a country in Asia. On the other hand, there is a limit to what you can do to let everybody decide their own local baskets. And this is baked into many of the living wage approaches at the moment. So it means it's expensive to do, it's often outdated, it can be distorted, and it's not comparable. We were wondering, wouldn't it be great if there was a method that you could use to efficiently collect the wages from the producers, to make sure that you get objective data with many observations that cannot be manipulated on cost of living, compare the wages against those local benchmarks, and then allow for an aggregate score for a brand adding up all their local producers. In the first place, it would be a very valuable metric for the brands themselves, and potentially it could be used to consumers as one simple score that they can actually look at on a label or in an app, but in a way which allows them to see, hey, this brand might be expensive, but it's doing a bad job paying their workers. This brand might be cheap, but actually it's doing a relatively good job paying their workers. We think we can offer the benchmarks for that, and to show you, I'll show you a little bit more about what WageIndicator is doing today. So I'm going to share my screen again. Well, the WageIndicator basically is an NGO which has been existing for 15 years now, and it's crowdsourcing wages, as its name is saying, in over 80 countries right now. It's showing the real wages. People can do a salary check, actually. So, for instance, when you're in India, and I'll switch to the English language site we have in India. For instance, for a weaving and knitting machine operator, we have 479 respondents that have given us indications on the wages that they earn. So we have a lower quartile and a higher quartile and a median. And people can use this and are using this all across the world to see if they are earning a wage in line with the local market. Which is not to say that that is a fair wage. So what we also have is we've got the minimum wages, and in many countries this is actually the premier source for people to go to check what the minimum wage is in a particular region. This is, for instance, for Indonesia. But moving on, we also have living wages since a year or two. So where we have been using the site for 15 years to make people contribute their wages that they earn. Since 2 years, we're also asking people to contribute the costs of the many living components that are necessary to make a fair living in the area. So here, for instance, you see the various wages for India, also minimum wage. We can also move to regional living wages. If you look in Delhi, there are individual, family and typical family wages being provided. Can tell you a little bit about the method, because that is quite important. One may ask, how do you get to the baskets? For the food, we use the balance sheets that are being produced by the FAO, the UN Organizations for Agriculture, so we can reflect the local consumption, and we won't pretend that people are drinking a lot of beer in Saudi Arabia or eating a lot of rice in South Africa, I don't know. So we have the local representative basket. It's not done bottom up. It's not as in many other living wage methodologies where people are really deciding for themselves what to put in it, but the obvious advantage is that it makes everything comparable. And when we get enough observations, it makes it very hard for anybody to manipulate the data and either lowball or highball the costs. That leads to reports like this one that we produce, where you can actually see the whole build-up from the products with low and high estimates based on the sample sizes, the kind of supply that's there in the food balance sheet, to, in the end, a low and a high estimate for a fair living wage. We add housing, transport, and other components to it, and in that way we have a living wage benchmark that we can use to put the local wages against. So a lot of the groundwork that otherwise would have been very difficult to get to has already been done. Going back now to look at you again. I hope that worked. And with those benchmarks, now we've got a very bold and hairy idea. We think it's possible, and we're working on that with a couple of brands, to produce a simple template, a one-pager, that can be circulated across the many producers in the supply chain. Ask them to self-report the wage that they are paying at lowest. There are a couple of questions needed in addition to make sure that it's not a meaningless submission. But in the scope of one page, it's possible to get that data point in and to, at the same page, compare it with our benchmark on living wages. That allows you to get to a relative measure of the living wage for every producer. It would allow you to aggregate the whole score for one brand to say, this brand is so many percentage points above the living wage, and compare brands versus one another. You could even think about more consumer-friendly measures like a green A to a red G, or a 5-star or a 10-point. We're looking at what works the best in communicatively. We would like to see this rating being implemented for every brand on a yearly basis, which could then even be added into the labels and communicated in any other way. But of course, we are certain that the first brands who would want to join in a method like this are the brands that already know that they are doing a relatively good job, and at the moment are having difficulty communicating that in a very compelling way. And we hope with this method we can offer that. So any brand on this call who would like to work with us on developing this method, please come forward and approach me. You can mail me with the address that Hill will be distributing. And also any partners that would like to work with us in using our benchmark in their wider certification. So we are already talking with Just, as was mentioned. Would be interested to talk to you. And now I'd like to open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. I don't see a new question coming in yet. Gary says, thank us for our transparency. Maybe you can give a bit more clarity on what you think is the power of this information you already have. How is it currently used? The minimum wage information, the living wage information you have on your website, and if you can be more specific for the garment industry, that would be great. What kind of visitors do you have on your platform, and how are they using the data right now?
Okay, maybe it's good to tell you that the whole background of Wage Indicator is from trade unions. It was funded by grants from trade unions in developed countries and also by some government organizations with the aim of providing transparency, thinking that you increase the legal empowerment of workers if they actually know what kind of wage they should be earning in the local context. So at the moment, this information is hardly used to be tied into supply chains. At the moment, this is used in all kinds of industries. In 80 countries, we don't have databases on living wages in all the 80 countries yet, but we are present in 80 countries, national language websites, where 80% of our visitors are employees and 20% are employers, could be small, big employers. In any case, they are looking to get some clarity on how much am I entitled to earn, given the minimum wage, and also on other work conditions. So we also have a decent work check. People are filling that in to compare where am I entitled to improvement that my employer is withholding from me. And to be honest, many employers actually are as curious, and we find that in a lot of the countries the situation is not very clear to them, and when they actually learn that they are not complying with legislation, it doesn't take much for them to then start doing that. So knowing leads to compliance and leads to empowerment. That is the whole scope of the website at the moment, and it's getting 20 million visitors each year by people who are doing just that. You're also asking about the garment industry, so there's no specific focus at the moment on the garment industry. And what we now need to do is to increase our network over there. We've got an excellent network with the more general bodies like trade unions, like employers associations, and we are now using those general conditions to get to the specific trade union federations in garments. So that's why I went to Indonesia a couple of weeks ago, and there we held a workshop for the West Java companies in how to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement and pay attention to the living wage in that regard. But we are actually having a real big job now, opening up our network and trying to get into contact with producers, both big and small.
Yeah. There is a question from Carrie. I'm going to. Can you read that, Jean-Paul, or shall I repeat it? Jean-Paul?
Profit statistics?
Yeah. Are we relying on profit statistics to involve producers who aren't already doing a pretty good job to improve their living wages, or is there another approach in the industry that invites a paradigm shift? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if I get that question. Is it proposing that instead of looking at the wages that the workers earn, we look at profits as an indication that some companies are profiteering are sort of a parasite. I think that is a very interesting way to look at it, but we won't have any information on that, whereas we do have a wealth of information on the wages. And I think for a living wage approach, actually that is a more direct question to be answered. I'm happy, I mean, I'm not completely against the market economy. I'm happy if some brand can make good profits out of being a responsible employer and paying good money to their workers.
Yeah. Have you?
But I'm not sure if that's answering the question. So if it isn't, maybe Carrie can follow up.
Yeah. Yeah, Carrie, if you feel that didn't ask your question, then please feel free to ask a follow-up question. Maybe because you mentioned employers and employees, and but brands themselves as users of your data, or consumers themselves as interested parties. Can you give a bit more information on, you spoke about your new initiative and the certificate on fair wages. Is there, can you say a little bit more on how the data can be used by ethical fashion brands who may be listening now, or to communicate exactly that they are working with suppliers that offer better wages than other suppliers, perhaps? Are there other ways for them to use your data?
Well, they're free to use our data as we are publishing it on the website. At the moment, we are completely open access, open source. To be honest, we are actually looking to supply this data more aligned with supply chains, also to create a new funding source, because our organization and our website, our platform has been growing tremendously over the last 15 years, and we're still funding ourselves with subsequent grant.
Yeah, okay. Jean-Paul, I think you're dropping out. I think Jean-Paul has a technical issue on his side, so I'm afraid we're going to have to close the conversation with him. Jean-Paul, I'm giving you one more chance. If not, I am going to gradually thank all the innovators. Yeah, there is one announcement that through the movie True Costs that Jean-Paul was referring to in the beginning, Project Just is organizing a screening of that movie True Costs tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. In 72 Allen Street, if I understood correctly. And there is a link to, that is, we will send the link around in the email follow-up so that everyone also knows where that will take place. So that's an opportunity to also mix and mingle there, and for anyone interested in fair fashion, ethical fashion, and meeting Project Just, go down to Allen Street in New York, 72, at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Okay. Does anyone else have some last words, some final reflections to add?
I'll just quickly say that it's been really neat to be in touch continually with both Just and the Wage Indicator over time, and see how we can work together. So just a quick thanks to Hill for kind of bringing us together and allowing us to see synergies and work alongside each other.
Yeah, just echo what Paloma said. Thank you to Hill for organizing this today, and also thank you to the other innovators for their willingness to collaborate. I think it's pretty exciting that we're all able to really see those opportunities to work together. So it's kind of an expansion upon each of our impact.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, it's been really exciting for me to hear what everyone's working on behind the scenes, and I hope to keep being able to give coverage to such good causes, whether directly to the innovators involved or to the brands that they're working with to bring this stuff to the forefront.
Yeah. Great, thank you. I think Jean-Paul, you are back on, if I understand correctly. No, he's not back on. Then I'm going to close the conversation. Thank you very much for participating. We'll send a follow-up email. I do hope there is some ethical fashion brands or other participants who do feel like picking up the dialogue and continuing the conversation. We're thrilled to have this group of innovators with us. I'm just reminding you that there's other innovators on innovatingjustice.com that you can reach out to. You can sign up, interact with them online or offline. So there's plenty of opportunities there to engage with some of the more progressive actors in this field. Thanks a lot, and yeah, wishing you a great rest of the day from Hill.